Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro has said that more than 4 million Venezuelans have taken an oath to defend the country in case of an attack from the United States. On Saturday, several top officials from the Maduro's government were seen across different cities in Venezuela participating in ceremonies where allegedly regular people were pronouncing the oath. Now, CNN cannot independently verify these figures. However, they show that the government and Maduro personally are taking the possibility and the risk of a US attack on Venezuelan soil very, very seriously. This is happening as the US Department of Defense has announced that the US forces will join the military of Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island just a few miles from the coast of Venezuela, in military drills starting on Sunday. And Maduro had also words for that event.
Que pretenden que sean amenazantes.
These are intended to be threatening to Venezuela, which does not allow itself to be threatened by anyone. They say they will do this from Monday to Thursday. The people of Trinidad and Tobago will see whether they continue to allow their waters and land to be used to seriously threaten the peace of the Caribbean.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has said on Air Force One that he has almost made up his mind on what to do with Venezuela. Across last week, several sources in the White House told CNN that the president had been briefed across military plans to take direct action in the country. Maduro told CNN on Thursday that he was still hoping for peace to prevail in this confrontation with the government of the US. However, the announcement on Saturday showed the tensions are still destined to escalate. For CNN, this is Stefano Pozzebon, Caracas.
And joining us now is Christopher Sabatini. He's Senior Fellow for Latin America at Chatham House. Thanks so much for being here with us. So just to start, do you get the sense President Trump is actually preparing to invade Venezuela, or is this just a massive show of force, or is a third option more likely, targeted strikes within the country?
Frankly, we don't know. I think this started out as an effort to try to incentivize the military to defect from Maduro and stage some form of transition. The idea was they would become nervous, begin to fear for their own lives, and seek an exit for Maduro. As the buildup increases, I think that's looking less likely. It could still happen, perhaps, but it's not going to be as easy as Trump had hoped. I don't think an invasion is in the works. It would take many more men than they have. Venezuela is a large country of 28 million people with multiple urban centers. I think right now they're still hoping that they can rattle the military to provoke some, if you will, regime change on the cheap without having to commit boots on the ground or even missiles to attack land sites. But I think there's a third option here, too. One is they try to launch a few missiles inside or drones inside Venezuela, take out some airstrips. There are no cocaine production facilities in Venezuela. And basically Trump could then declare this, because he's been defining this only as a mission to protect the country against narcotics. He could declare mission accomplished. The drug sites have been taken out. We've killed 70 or 80 now people in these 20 boats who are going home now. That would be difficult, and it'd probably be a win for Maduro. But quite frankly, Trump's ambiguity leads us to wonder what he's really thinking.
Well, let me pick up on something you said there. You said there's no cocaine production sites within the country. I mean, the administration says this is all about stopping drug trafficking. I know this is something you've written a lot about. So how central is Venezuela then to the drug trade?
Frankly, it's not. It is indeed deeply complicit in narcotics trafficking or overflights. But really only about 5 to 8% of the cocaine that reaches the U.S. market comes from Venezuela. It's not produced in Venezuela. Fentanyl is not produced at all, but cocaine is produced in Colombia. And basically what the Maduro government has done is allow for overflights and landing strips and storage facilities in Venezuela from which the cocaine would take off. But most of that is actually destined to Europe. But there are other forms of illegal activity that go on in Venezuela. There's money laundering. There are more than 800 political prisoners. It's funny to hear Nicolas Maduro in your previous report talk about peace. He's unleashed a war on his own people. Not that that may necessarily justify U.S. intervention of boots on the ground, but he also engages in illicit gold mining and other forms of human trafficking that do implicate this government very deeply in criminal networks.
So, I mean, if this isn't really then about drugs and about regime change, I mean, Maduro claims it is all about the U.S. trying to oust him from power. The country's main opposition leaders calling for loyalists to rise up. You spoke about the U.S. Hope that this would instigate the military to defect. I mean, how likely is that scenario, do you think?
Well, first of all, this is about regime change, as you just said, Kim. This has been tried before. It was tried a number of times, including in 2002 when the opposition staged a series of protests hoping that they would rattle the military and push out then President Hugo Chavez. It was tried under Trump's first term in 2019 when they elected, or the National Assembly elected, an interim Democratic president, and then who called then for the military to overthrow Maduro and recognize him as the legitimate president of Venezuela. It was hoped that this would happen after the stolen elections last year, in which Maduro claimed victory, but it's proven that he lost and probably only won about 30%. But the truth is Maduro's been very effective in controlling his armed forces and including also his paramilitaries and colectivos by inducing them through corruption, threatening them. If you dissent within the military, you pay a very high price. Your family can even be imprisoned, or you can be killed, or you're forced into exile. So the opportunities for the sort of defection that I think that the Trump administration is hoping for are very slim. And even if it does occur, there are no guarantees that who comes in next, given the extent of corruption within this government, there's no guarantee that that person or that coalition would be any cleaner or less embedded in narcotics trafficking than the current president.
No, well then let me ask you that. I mean, it does sound as though Maduro does have a strong grip on power, but let's say the U.S. is successful in ousting Maduro. I mean, what does that day after look like for Venezuela, do you think?
There are a lot of scenarios here, Tim. I think one is the hope that the military will completely fold, and that they'll simply throw open the doors and invite in the Democratic opposition, including the man who did win the elections last year, Mundo Gonzalez, and his supporter, Maria Corina Machado, who recently won the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think that's very likely, though. What I do think is some sort of managed transition that would at least allow some of the stakeholders within this government to retain some power, and if you will, save themselves from prosecution and even potentially exile.
Yeah, so many various scenarios. We still don't have many answers. We'll be watching. Christopher Sabatini, thank you so much. Really appreciate your insights on this.
Thank you.
Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's received a wave of threats amid her escalating feud with President Trump. On Friday, he rescinded his endorsement of Greene, once a staunch ally, and attacked her in personal terms. The Georgia representative accused Trump of trying to use her as an example to frighten Republicans ahead of a House vote on releasing files connected to the criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. CNN senior White House reporter Betsy Klein has more on the reason for the rift between the president and his former ally.
Well, this major political breakup would have been unfathomable just months ago, but as Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene ramped up her criticism of President Trump and his strategy in recent weeks, it became clear to officials that it might be just a matter of time before something like this happened. And Greene has been taking aim at the White House on a pair of fronts, taking that message to outlets like CNN and ABC's The View. The first is domestic. She, in her view, believes that President Trump is not doing enough to focus on affordability issues and is spending too much time on his relationships with world leaders and solving conflicts abroad. Separately, on Jeffrey Epstein, Greene is one of just 4 House Republicans who is publicly calling for the Justice Department to release a tranche of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, and there's going to be a major political test of that in the coming days as the House is set to take a vote on releasing those documents. Greene has shared insight into some of the advice that she's been giving to the White House, sharing a screenshot of a text she sent to a top Trump aide on social media. She wrote, quote, "Stop ignoring the women." She goes on to say that them being raped as teenagers is not a hoax, pushing back on some of the president's rhetoric on this issue. But the president has been asked multiple times about Greene's stepped-up rhetoric against him, most recently on Friday as he made his way here to Florida. Listen.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "Oh, gee, I'm spending too much time overseas." So let's say I don't meet with China. You know what's happened right now? To Georgia and every other state? They're not working because your magnets and your rare earths would have kicked in, and there wouldn't be a factory in the world that was working. If I didn't have a relationship overseas with China, I think that her constituents aren't going to be happy. Already, I have people calling me. They want to challenge her Georgia.
But this escalated significantly in the moments after Trump landed here in Florida, announcing in a post to social media that he was officially rescinding his endorsement of Greene and lobbing increasingly personal attacks against her. Greene, for her part, has warned that those attacks have consequences, saying in a post, quote, "A hotbed of threats against me are being fueled and egged on by the most powerful man in the world, the man I supported and helped get elected. Aggressive rhetoric attacking me has historically led to death threats and multiple convictions of men who were radicalized by the same type of rhetoric being directed at me right now, this time by the President of the United States." Now, Greene has been a major ally for Trump and his MAGA political movement, and this whole episode raises new questions about the future of that MAGA movement in the absence of Trump. Betsy Klein, CNN, traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida.
And for more on this, I want to bring in Mark Shanahan, who's an associate professor of politics at the University of Surrey, and he joins us now from Oxford in England. Thanks so much for being here with us again. So let's start there with this rift between President Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, it's been quite extraordinary to watch. She went from one of his most loyal supporters to someone he's calling a ranting lunatic. I mean, what do you make of their breakup?
Marjorie Taylor Greene is a conviction politician. She will stick to her guns, however unpopular, however wacky as the president would describe them. She has slowly split with him over foreign affairs issues, so starting with Ukraine, she very much pushed the America First line. With his support for Israel, she talks about Gaza being genocide. But domestically, she's looking at an election in the future. She's looking at the rising cost of living. She's looking at the Affordable Care Act and the huge increase in the cost of health insurance premiums that are coming down the line. And this is alienating her from Trump. But then there's Epstein as well. She's on the Oversight Committee, but is one of just 4 House Republicans to have come out alongside the Democrats in backing the Epstein Transparency Act. And this has really riled Trump. Epstein, for whatever reason, is his kryptonite. It is the issue he wants to avoid at all costs. And here is a very outspoken, popular populist who is pushing for the release of all of those files. And that has really aggravated the president.
Yeah. You study political movements. I mean, picking up on what we heard in that report there as she ended talking about the future of the MAGA movement. I mean, do you see this as a fracture of the MAGA coalition, or is that reading too much into a disagreement between, 2 very strong personalities?
I think at this stage it's possibly reading a bit too much in, but never forget it was a very fragile alliance that brought Trump's power last November. Through that election period, he had a solid 30% of the vote through core MAGA voters who he was telling he was going to release all of the Epstein files. This was a major part of his platform. But he also had soft Republicans, he also had centrists who were looking for an improvement in their economic fortune. And what Taylor Greene is trying to highlight time and again is that he hasn't yet delivered any economic improvement for mainstream America. All of the much vaunted jobs have yet to arrive on American shores. Inflation still remains stubbornly high, prices at the supermarket are still high, and people are beginning to see this. This is what he told MAGA he was going to deliver on, and little thorns in his side, like Taylor Greene, are showing that he is yet to do that, and she is playing up that he's spending too much time abroad, when it's the domestic issues, particularly now post-shutdown, that should be getting his attention.
Yeah. Looking at then President Trump's reaction to the Epstein issue specifically, I mean, the president has ordered his Justice Department to investigate Bill Clinton and other Democrats. Presumably, most of those who support the administration have no problem with a president directing criminal investigations against political opponents because they feel that's what Democrats did against Trump. But beyond his base, how do you think this will play? I mean, not just sort of in the short term with voters, but maybe more problematically Are people becoming numb to a more weaponized Justice Department, do you think?
There is a real danger of that there is a sense that this administration can get away with just about everything, because every time there is a check or a balance thrown in their way, they somehow hurdle it, go round it, go under it, just get past it. And the onrush towards a more autocratic state of government in the US is happening pretty quickly without a whole lot of opposition. That now is building opposition, whether we've seen it at the ballot box the other week, whether it was in the 7 million people who came out and protested against this administration. There is increasing pushback. And as you say, the hardcore MAGA movement will never turn against Trump, no matter what is found in these files, however they are released at some point in the future. But he needs more than that hardcore for Republicans to stay in power through the midterms and through to 2028, and then for that presidential election when that comes. So this is where we may see a fracturing, less of people, but of ideas and of support.
Appreciate getting your take on all this. Mark Shanahan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
President Trump has pardoned 2 more participants of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. President Trump pardoned militia member Dan Wilson's Kentucky firearms offenses after an appeals court refused to vacate his sentences. He also pardoned Suzanne Kay, who was convicted of threatening to shoot FBI agents trying to question her about January 6th. The new pardons continue the trend Trump started in January when he issued more than 1,000 pardons and commutations of those involved with the January 6th riots. All right, still ahead, fear on the streets of another American city as federal law officers are deployed against the city's wishes. Plus, Chile is about to elect a new president. We'll have those stories and more coming up after the break. Stay with us.
Patriots